My mom grabbed the mic at my sister's wedding and grinned. My one true daughter is the bride. Her sister? A divorced, child-free high school dropout. The audience chuckled. My sister smirked and snatched the mic. Come on, don't be too harsh. She might start crying. I rose, walked over to the stage, and took the mic. Now let's kick off the true celebration. On a frigid, snowy night in Boston, Eleanor Johnson dragged her weary feet up the stairs and unlocked the door to her cramped apartment after finishing yet another part-time shift. As always, she was met by the chill of a bare room and the familiar sound of her mother and sister laughing in the kitchen. "Eleanor, you're here," said her mother, Mary, without even turning around. Her tone was as cold as the room. Seated at the table with her college laptop open was her sister, Brittany, whose vibrant presence and effortless beauty sharply contrasted with Eleanor's exhaustion. "Great job today," Brittany remarked, though her eyes remained glued to the screen. Removing her coat, Eleanor quietly approached the small kitchen table, a space that had housed the three of them since she was 16. Since their father succumbed to cancer and their lives were further upended after her husband's death, everything had shifted. Mary had turned to alcohol, and even though she picked up occasional part-time jobs, they hardly covered the household bills. "How did your mock trial go at law school?" Eleanor asked softly. "It was fantastic. The professor praised my argument as the best in class, and I even secured an internship," Brittany replied, her face lighting up with a rare beaming smile. "Congratulations," Eleanor said sincerely. Then Mary, wrapping an arm around her daughter, beamed with pride. "My daughter is truly exceptional. Brittany is destined to be a first-rate lawyer. Your father must be smiling down from heaven." Eleanor returned the smile, though her eyes betrayed a hint of sorrow. When her father was alive, she too had dreamed of college, business studies, and launching her own company, dreams that had vanished with his passing. Forced to drop out of high school in her sophomore year to help support the family, she had been labeled as unsuitable for academics, even though she had once been an excellent student. Moments later, Brittany's voice rang out with excitement. "Eleanor, guess what? I'm heading to Miami with some friends for spring break to celebrate my internship at the law firm." Eleanor withdrew several bills from her wallet and spread them on the table. "Is this enough?" she inquired. "Yes, thank you," Brittany replied, her gratitude curt, as though the money were merely expected. Without further ado, Eleanor retreated into her modest room. There, she retrieved a small box from beneath her bed and booted up her laptop in the quiet hours after the rest of the family had gone to sleep. This was her secret time. A time dedicated to self-teaching business through online courses, mastering web design, and absorbing the basics of marketing. 2 years ago, she had discreetly launched an online shop selling handmade accessories. At first, sales were few and far between, but over time, orders steadily increased as she skillfully leveraged social media to build her own brand image. She had kept this venture hidden, convinced that her mother and sister would dismiss it as a frivolous hobby. Then 6 months ago, her business made a significant leap forward when a well-known fashion blogger featured her designs, and orders began flooding in. Profits that far exceeded her expectations. Last month, she moved out without alerting her family, who still saw her as nothing more than a high school dropout squandering her life. The phone rang and it was Brittany again, her voice trembling with excitement. "Eleanor, big news, Jason proposed." "Yes, the son of the Reynolds family. The wedding is in 3 months and you must come." Eleanor offered sincere congratulations, even as she heard Mary's jubilant exclamation from the phone. "My daughter is marrying into a prestigious family." Brittany continued outlining the wedding details. A lavish hotel, hundreds of guests, an extravagant dress. "Make sure you wear something decent to the ceremony," Brittany advised, "so you don't end up looking embarrassing." After the call ended, Eleanor paused by the window to admire the sparkling night. The view from her new office, a top floor in a skyscraper, had become her secret headquarters. On her desk lay her business card as the founder of Elite Innovation, a success she had carefully concealed from her family. For now, her only plan was to attend her sister's wedding and quietly celebrate her own achievements. Later that evening, Eleanor stepped into the hotel elevator with a gentle smile, pausing to take in her reflection in the mirror. Her simple yet elegant silver-gray dress, complete with subtle embroidery at the neckline, her own creation, accentuated her refined features. As she entered the grand ballroom, she was immediately enveloped by luxurious decor and the delicate scent of fresh flowers. The white and silver theme evoked the charm of a winter fairy tale. "Eleanor, you've arrived," a familiar voice called. Turning, she saw Mary, resplendent in a striking red dress adorned with glittering jewels on her neck and wrists. "Of course, it's Brittany's special day," Eleanor replied kindly. Mary appraised her daughter from head to toe and said, "You look surprisingly presentable," which was the highest praise she could offer. "Have you greeted the Reynolds family yet?" Mary asked urgently. "Hurry along. It's important to make a good impression and not embarrass Brittany." Nodding quietly, Eleanor mingled with familiar faces. Old school friends, former neighbors, and relatives from her mother's side. When someone inquired about her life, she would simply reply, "I've started a small business." After an opulent lunch, the reception began. The groom, Jason, a tall, imposing man with eyes filled with tender affection, watched Brittany, who looked every bit the perfect bride in her pristine white gown. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the toast," the master of ceremonies announced. "Let's first hear a few words from the bride's mother, Mrs. Mary Johnson." The venue fell silent as Mary strode confidently onto the stage and took the microphone, her smile radiant. "Thank you all for joining us today to celebrate Brittany's wedding," she began. "I am truly blessed to have such a wonderful daughter, and to see her welcomed into a remarkable family." Pausing for effect, Mary's gaze fell on Eleanor, and her tone shifted as if sharing a secret. "Allow me to let you in on something. Brittany is my only true daughter." A ripple of laughter ran through the room. "Some of you might ask, where is my other daughter, Eleanor?" "Ah, there she is," Mary declared, gesturing towards her. Suddenly, the venue's lights focused on Eleanor, who stiffened visibly. "But truthfully, she's a failure, divorced, childless, a high school dropout with nothing to offer. Quite the opposite of Brittany, wouldn't you agree?" Uncomfortable laughter and puzzled looks passed among the guests, while Eleanor's face flushed, yet she maintained a composed demeanor. Before the tension could heighten further, Brittany stood and interjected, "Mom, may I say something?" Stepping onto the stage, she took the microphone with a sly smile. "I know my mother's words might have caught you off guard, but please don't tease my sister too harshly. She might break down in tears." The venue chuckled again, though beneath her cheerful tone lay a hint of irony. "The truth is, my sister has always sacrificed for me. She gave up her own dreams so I could pursue my education," Brittany continued, her eyes locking with Eleanor's in a mixture of guilt and pride. Then with measured steps, Brittany slowly retreated, leaving the room in a heavy silence. All eyes then turned to Eleanor as she stepped forward and gently reclaimed the microphone, her smile calm yet resolute. "Now let us begin the real celebration," she announced quietly, her voice resonating throughout the hall. Standing still on the stage, the soft glow from the lights made her silver-gray dress shimmer as if she were illuminated from within. Mary reached out to touch her daughter's shoulder, but Eleanor deftly sidestepped the gesture. Observing from afar, Brittany's expression wavered between apprehension and curiosity. With quiet determination, Eleanor lifted the microphone to her lips and began. "Today, I am truly delighted that my dear sister Brittany has exchanged eternal vows with the one she loves." Her tone was free of anger or sarcasm, filled only with sincere blessing. "Our family has faced many hardships since our father was taken by cancer," she continued, her eyes momentarily distant as if revisiting old memories. "When I was 16, our lives were turned upside down. I left high school in my sophomore year, not because I was unfit for studies, but because I needed to support our family in the wake of my father's passing. My mother was overwhelmed by grief, and I wanted Brittany to have the brightest future possible." Eleanor scanned the room as guests listened intently. "I juggled 3 jobs, serving at a cafe in the morning, cleaning offices in the afternoon, and working a convenience store at night, averaging barely 4 hours of sleep a day. Yet I never regretted it, knowing that every dollar earned helped fund Brittany's education at a top university and covered mother's mounting medical expenses." Mary's face began to redden as she tried to signal for silence, worried that Jason's parents might notice. "As my mother once claimed, I am a high school dropout with no marital ties or children," Eleanor added softly, eliciting a few gentle laughs from the audience. "But whether you label me a failure or not, I am proud of the life I have built." Pausing briefly to sip some water, she delivered her final stunning revelation. I am the one paying for this magnificent wedding today. The room buzzed with astonishment as Brittany's mouth fell open in shock. When I received that engagement call from my sister, I was overjoyed because I truly wanted her to have the extravagant wedding she had always dreamed of. In that moment, as the tension slowly gave way to understanding, the celebration took on a new meaning, a testament to sacrifice, resilience, and the quiet triumph of a life built in the shadows. Eleanor continued, You might be curious how a high school dropout like me could afford all this. A gentle smile graced her face. The truth is, I launched an online business a few years back. It began as a modest accessory boutique, and slowly grew until we now work with Fortune 500 companies. Murmurs of astonishment rippled through the venue. Some of you may have heard of my company, Elite Innovation. We're celebrated for our inventive designs and eco-friendly production methods. From a quiet corner, an elderly gentleman rose with a dignified air and announced, Miss Eleanor Johnson, you are indeed the founder of Elite Innovation, the very person who graced the cover of last month's business magazine. Eleanor nodded serenely. Yes, that's right. You must be William Reynolds. It's a pleasure to meet you. The room buzzed even more as William, Jason's uncle and one of America's most influential businessmen, continued, I've heard plenty about your enterprise. As a pioneer in sustainable fashion, you've become a role model for many young entrepreneurs. I understand your company's revenue exceeded $100 million last year. With a modest smile, Eleanor replied, We're still a growing venture. In that moment, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Where pity once filled the eyes of onlookers, respect and wonder now shone. Mary's face turned ashen, nearly causing her to collapse into her chair, while Brittany stood there utterly stunned. Reclaiming the microphone, Eleanor said, I don't wish to dwell on my success. Today belongs to Brittany and Jason. Turning toward the bride and groom, she continued, I speak only to share one truth. Taking a deep breath, she scanned the room. The reason I left high school was to support my family. I juggled 3 jobs so that my sister could receive the best education. And the reason I kept my success to myself, she hesitated for a moment, was because I was torn between wanting recognition and not hurting my family. For the first time, tears shimmered in her eyes, yet she let them fall freely. I have always cherished my mother and sister, even when they branded me a failure. I sacrificed my dreams so that yours might come true, because that is what family is all about. A solemn silence fell as many guests wiped away tears. Eventually, I realized that my own life was worth living. So years ago, I left home to chart my own course, standing firmly on my own 2 feet. Pausing, she looked tenderly at Brittany. Brittany, you are my cherished sister. There was a time when I didn't wish for your happiness, but today I wholeheartedly celebrate your union with Jason. Glancing at Jason, she added, Jason, I know you are a wonderful man. Please make my sister happy. Then, addressing the entire room, she declared, Everyone, this is my story. A journey of a high school dropout labeled a failure. Yet I regret nothing because every step shaped who I am today. From a distant corner, soft applause began and quickly swelled into a resounding ovation. As the clamor faded into an unusual stillness, Eleanor set the microphone down and moved to exit the stage. At that moment, Mary abruptly rose and seized her daughter's arm. Why are you telling such lies? Who would believe that you've become so successful? Her trembling voice echoed through the venue, drawing anxious glances from the guests. Meeting her mother's gaze calmly, Eleanor replied with firm resolve, Mom, I'm not lying. Whether you believe it or not, it is the truth. Mary's face flushed with anger as she shouted, I raised you. I know everything about you. How can someone who couldn't even graduate high school become the head of a large company? The room held its breath. Once more, William Reynolds stood and slowly approached. Excuse me, Mrs. Mary, he said with authority. What Eleanor is saying is fact. I work directly with her company, and Elite Innovation was named one of the top 10 fastest-growing companies in Forbes magazine last year. Mary was rendered speechless while Brittany stepped closer, her eyes filled with mixed emotions. In a soft voice, she asked, Is it true? You paid for this wedding. Eleanor nodded slowly. I did it simply because I wanted you to be happy. Tears welled in Brittany's eyes as she hesitated, and Eleanor continued quietly, I have always loved our family, Brittany. I sacrificed my own dreams so that yours could flourish, and I still wish only the best for you." Her words echoed throughout the hall. "I left home to reclaim my own destiny. I wanted to succeed independently, without leaning on anyone else." With a slight tremor, she added, "But today I've learned the truth of your feelings." A solitary tear slid down her cheek. "Even so, I hold no ill will, because family remains family." Mary stood mute, and Brittany shook her head through her tears as a heavy silence settled over the venue. Then Jason rose and moved to his bride's side, gently placing his hand on her shoulder. Speaking softly but clearly, he said, "What I have heard about your family and seen today could not be more different." Brittany looked up at him, fear in her eyes. Jason gently interjected, turning to Eleanor and bowing slightly. "Miss Eleanor, you embody true strength and love. I am ashamed that I did not realize this until today." Brittany's face turned pale as, in a trembling voice, she managed, "Jason, we'll discuss this later." His response was curt and cold, "We'll talk later," as his eyes reflected disappointment. Striving to ease the tension, Eleanor reclaimed the microphone and said softly, "Today is not a day for sorrow. Today is Brittany's day. Let us celebrate her new beginning." Lifting her wine glass in a toast to Brittany and Jason's future, the ensuing applause was soft yet laden with respect. Meanwhile, Brittany's face flushed with embarrassment and guilt as she kept her gaze lowered for the rest of the ceremony. Mary retreated to a corner, barely uttering a word as humiliation stained her features. The perfect family image she once boasted had crumbled. Brittany stood by Jason, but an obvious tension lingered between them. Though he behaved politely, a coldness shone in his eyes toward his wife. Before long, guests surrounded Eleanor, inquiring about her business and the secret behind her success. She answered every question with humility. When William asked for her secret, she simply smiled and said, "Honesty, patience, and a touch of luck, though it's more than just luck." William added, "Your talent and passion have truly carried you to where you are today." As the reception wound down, Eleanor sat alone in a quiet corner, lost in thought over the day's events. Suddenly, Brittany appeared, her eyes red from crying. "Is there something you want to say?" Eleanor asked softly. Brittany hesitated as if gathering her thoughts and finally whispered, "I'm sorry." Eleanor looked at her sister calmly. "Brittany, you need not apologize," she said. "But I must say, I've always loved you and I gave up my own dreams so that yours could come true. I only ever wished for your happiness." Her words resonated throughout the room as tears shimmered in many eyes. "I left home to forge my own path and to succeed on my own, without relying on anyone else." Her voice trembled slightly as she added, "Today I learned the truth about your feelings. Yet even so, I bear no resentment because family is family." Mary stood silently, and Brittany shook her head amidst her tears as a heavy quiet settled over the venue. At that moment, Jason stepped forward and placed his hand on Brittany's shoulder. "What I've heard about your family and what I witnessed today are worlds apart," he said. Brittany looked up at him, fear evident in her eyes. Gently, Jason turned to Eleanor and bowed slightly. "Miss Eleanor, you are the embodiment of true strength and love. I am ashamed that I did not know this until now." Brittany's face went pale as she managed, "Jason, about us, we'll talk later," to which he replied curtly, "We'll talk later." Disappointed, his eyes held a cold glint. Eleanor then spoke again. "Everyone, today is not for sorrow. Today is Brittany's day. Let's celebrate her fresh start." She raised her glass in a final toast to Brittany and Jason's future. The applause that followed was subdued yet respectful, a far cry from before. Brittany's face flushed with remorse, her eyes downcast, while Mary sat silently in a corner, the shattering of her once perfect family image evident. In the midst of the evening, numerous guests approached Eleanor, eager to learn about her business success and the secrets behind her remarkable journey. With gentle humility, she explained, "The secret to success is honesty, patience, and a bit of luck." William remarked, "Your talent and passion have undoubtedly brought you here." As the night drew to a close, Eleanor found herself alone in a quiet corner, reflecting on the tumultuous day. Then, unexpectedly, Brittany appeared, thinner with a worn complexion yet determined. "May I come in?" she asked softly. Eleanor welcomed her without a word, and though Brittany seemed overwhelmed by the office's luxury, she confided, "Jason and I are separating. Eleanor simply took her sister's hand. Perhaps that's for the best, Brittany continued. I needed time to understand who I truly am and why I turned out this way. For the first time, I'm sorry, I now see how much you sacrificed for us. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes as she quietly rose and embraced her sister. The past is behind us. What matters is how we move forward. Outside, the spring sunshine bathed the city of Boston in radiant light. A true season of new beginnings, and the weeks following the wedding, Boston's brisk spring air carried a subtle promise of change, as if nature itself urged the family to find healing in its renewal. At her new office, a modest space on an upper floor that had become her private sanctuary, Eleanor often found herself reflecting on the events that had unfolded. The echoes of that turbulent evening still reverberated in her mind. The searing words, the long-hidden truths, and the raw emotion in Brittany's eyes, as well as her own trembling voice when she declared, I left home to reclaim my destiny. Even as business continued to thrive at Elite Innovation, success was a bittersweet reminder of the sacrifices she had made, and the deep wounds that still festered within her family. One chilly morning, as Eleanor sipped a lukewarm coffee while watching the city come to life, a message popped up on her phone. A request from Brittany for a private meeting at a quiet park near the Boston Common. The invitation was tentative, laced with vulnerability and the silent hope of mending broken bonds. Though apprehensive, Eleanor agreed. Deep down, she longed for reconciliation, even if the path toward forgiveness was strewn with painful memories. Under the canopy of blossoming trees, the sisters met on a weathered wooden bench. The soft rustling of leaves provided a gentle backdrop for their conversation. Brittany's eyes, still red-rimmed from recent tears, met Eleanor's steady gaze. I'm sorry, Brittany began haltingly, her voice trembling. I never meant to hurt you that night. I was scared. Scared of what I might lose if I saw you truly succeed, and scared of the truth about our past. I've been so wrapped up in trying to keep up appearances that I forgot what matters most. Her confession was simple yet profound, laden with years of regret and hidden insecurities. Eleanor listened in silence for a long moment, the weight of old grievances mixing with a cautious hope. I spent so many years believing that my failures defined me, Eleanor admitted softly. Every late night, every extra shift, every sacrifice I made. It was all to support you and Mom, even when you both treated my dreams like burdens. I didn't do it for recognition or for praise. I did it because I believed in our family, even when it seemed like no one else did. Her voice was steady now, carrying both sorrow and a quiet strength. As the conversation deepened, the sisters touched upon memories of their father, a man whose untimely departure had shattered their world, and of Mary, whose inability to see beyond her own bitterness had left scars that ran deep. Brittany's eyes filled with remorse as she confessed, I realize now that I never truly understood your struggles, and I allowed our mother's harsh words to poison the way I saw you. I was so focused on what I thought was right that I forgot to see the pain behind your silence. The conversation shifted from accusations to understanding, and both sisters found that beneath the layers of resentment lay a shared longing for acceptance and love. They talked about dreams that had once been whispered in the quiet hours of childhood, and how those dreams were sacrificed in the name of survival. Brittany admitted that her relationship with Jason had been more about maintaining a certain image than about genuine happiness. I thought I was protecting myself by clinging to that life, she said, voice barely above a whisper. But in truth, I was only distancing myself from what really matters. Over the coming weeks, the sisters began to meet regularly, sometimes in the park, sometimes in a small cafe where they could speak without fear of judgment. Their conversations, though initially tentative, grew in depth and honesty. With each shared story and tearful admission, the distance between them slowly shrank. They decided to approach their mother together, a step that neither had taken alone, for the sake of healing old wounds. Mary, initially defensive and steeped in years of ingrained resentment, found herself confronted with the raw truths of her daughter's lives. In a quiet, heartfelt moment at home, with the evening light casting long shadows across the worn living room floor, Mary listened as Eleanor and Brittany spoke candidly about the pain they had endured. For the first time, Mary's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and her voice, when it came, was choked with regret. I see now that I let my own hurt and pride blind me to your struggles, she confessed. I am truly sorry for the words I said and the way I made you feel. You both deserve to be cherished for who you are, not for what you are not. Though forgiveness did not come instantly, that conversation marked the beginning of a slow but genuine transformation. The three of them, each scarred by the past yet determined to move forward, committed to rebuilding the fragile threads of family ties. Therapy sessions, shared meals, and long walks in the park became the setting for mending hearts. Eleanor continued to nurture her business, but she also made time to share her success openly, not as a trophy, but as a testament to her resilience. Brittany sought professional help to untangle the knots of guilt and self-doubt that had long plagued her, learning to see herself through kinder eyes. And Mary, humbled by the consequences of her own rigidity, began to embrace change, expressing warmth and unconditional love in ways she had never known before. In time, the once fractured family discovered that the true measure of success lay not in outward appearances or financial achievements, but in the courage to acknowledge one's imperfections and the determination to support one another despite them. Their story, a tapestry woven with pain, sacrifice, and ultimately redemption, became a quiet inspiration to those who learned of it. The shadow of the past receded slowly under the light of understanding, replaced by the warm glow of hope and the promise of new beginnings. On a bright spring afternoon, as Boston basked in the gentle sunlight, the family gathered together for a small celebration in a modest garden behind their old apartment. The air was filled with the soft scent of blooming flowers and the sound of laughter that, this time, was free from bitterness. Eleanor, Brittany, and Mary sat side by side, sharing memories and dreams, each silently grateful for the opportunity to rewrite their shared narrative. In that serene moment, with the city's skyline stretching out in the distance, it was clear that while the journey had been arduous, the path toward forgiveness and unity had finally emerged. Their hearts, once heavy with regret, now beat in unison, a testament to the enduring power of love, resilience, and the unbreakable bonds of family.